Every year, my family forgot my birthday like it was trash on the curb. The silence in that house hurt more than any shouting ever could. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for just a second, feel like any of this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It'll help me keep unburdening myself. My name is Teresa Miller, and I live, or rather survive, in a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb of Westchester, New York. Every morning I get up at 6:30 to make a breakfast no one thanks me for, to clean a house no one values, to care for a family that long ago stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an obligation. This morning, March 15th, just like every other morning of my 58 years, I woke up with that strange feeling in my chest, that little flicker of hope I was ashamed to admit I still had. It was my birthday. I stayed in bed a moment longer, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. The drip of the bathroom faucet that's been leaking for 3 months. The same one Ryan promised to fix. The low murmur of the TV in the living room where my daughter-in-law Ashley was watching her morning shows. And the thud of my eldest son's hurried footsteps coming down the stairs. Maybe today will be different, I told myself, stroking the quilt I'd hand-stitched years ago, back when I still believed that things made with love were appreciated in this family. I dressed with care. I put on the blue dress I'd bought on sale at Macy's 2 years ago, the one Ashley had criticized, saying it made me look older. I combed my brown hair, more gray in it than I like to admit, and put on a little makeup, because even if no one else noticed, I still saw myself in the mirror every morning. I went down to the kitchen on silent feet, a habit I'd learned to avoid disturbing anyone. The cold tile floor under my bare feet reminded me of all the early mornings I'd spent here preparing bottles, soothing fevers, and patching up scraped knees. These very tiles had witnessed my entire motherhood. Ryan was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone with the intense focus he got when something at work was stressing him out. At 35, my eldest was a handsome man, with dark hair combed back and a neat beard that gave him a distinguished air. He worked in finance in Manhattan, a job he considered very important, and that required, according to him, a lot of focus and very few interruptions. "Good morning, honey," I said softly, leaning in to give him a kiss on the cheek as I had every morning for the past 35 years. He barely looked up. Morning, Mom." His voice was automatic, like a vending machine dispensing a soda after you insert the coins. Ashley appeared in the kitchen in her pink silk robe, the one that cost more than 3 months of my clothes. My daughter-in-law was a 30-year-old blonde, with a beauty she cultivated with obsessive care. She always smelled of expensive perfume, Chanel, she'd once told me proudly, and had a way of walking that suggested the world should part to make way for her. "Oh, Teresa, you're up already? I thought you might sleep in a little today," she said, with that smile that never reached her eyes. "It's just that Ryan and I have to get out early. His mother wants us to drive her out to the wineries on the North Fork." My heart stopped for a second. "His mother?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes, Eleanor. You know how she is, always with her little whims. Says she wants to celebrate something important." Ashley shrugged as she poured her coffee into one of my fine china cups, the ones I'd inherited from my own mother. The silence filled the kitchen like a thick fog. Ryan kept staring at his phone. Ashley stirred her coffee with mechanical movements. And I just stood there by the counter feeling something break deep inside my chest. "But today is," I started to say, my voice cracking slightly. "What is it, Mom?" Ryan finally looked up, but with that flicker of annoyance he got whenever his routine was interrupted. "It's my birthday," I said, and the words came out so quietly I could barely hear them myself. The silence that followed was worse than any shout. Ryan blinked, as if he were processing information in a foreign language. Ashley stopped stirring her coffee and gave me a look I couldn't decipher. "Oh, right. That's true," my son finally said. But his tone was the same one he'd used to remember it was trash day. "Couldn't you, maybe, postpone the visit with Eleanor?" The question escaped my lips before I could stop it, and I immediately felt like a child asking for permission. Ashley let out a small laugh that sounded like shattering glass. "Oh, Teresa, don't be so dramatic. You have a birthday every year. Eleanor is turning 75. Who knows how many more she has?" The cruelty in her words hit me like a slap. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter to keep from swaying, while my daughter-in-law kept talking as if nothing had happened. Besides, family commitments are important. And Eleanor is family now. And what am I? The question flew out of me before I could stop it. Ryan sighed. That long, weary sigh that had become so familiar in recent years. Mom, please don't start with the drama. You live here, you're taken care of, you have everything you need. There's no need to make a scene over a birthday. His words fell on me like stones. A scene, he'd said. My birthday was a scene. In that moment, looking at my son, the same boy I had held in my arms when he had a fever, the one I had defended from bullies at school, the one who'd earned a college degree with the money I'd saved working double shifts cleaning offices, I realized something terrible. I had raised a stranger who happened to carry my last name, and that stranger was casting me aside like an old piece of furniture that no longer matched the new decor. They left that morning without saying goodbye. Not a, see you later. Not a, have a good day. Just the slam of the front door and the sound of Ryan's BMW pulling out of the driveway and disappearing down Maple Avenue, taking with it any shred of hope I might have been hoarding in some corner of my heart. I was left alone in that kitchen that smelled of someone else's coffee and broken promises. The dirty mugs were still on the table, stained with the lips of people who considered themselves too important to wash their own dishes. The Italian coffee maker, the one I'd bought with my first paycheck as a cleaner 20 years ago, dripped onto the counter, each drop marking the time I was wasting, waiting for acknowledgement from people who had forgotten how to give it. I looked out the window at the backyard, where Mrs. Peterson was hanging her laundry like she did every morning, moving with the slow deliberation of her 80 years, but with a dignity I had lost without even realizing it. She'd lived alone since her husband died 10 years ago, but she always had a smile for the neighbors, always found reasons to keep going without begging anyone for affection. When had I become so small? When had I started asking for permission to exist in my own house? I went to the hall closet and pulled out the shoebox where I kept the family photos. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid, as if I were opening a coffin filled with memories I no longer knew were real, or just things my mind had invented to survive. The first photograph hit me in the gut. Ryan at 5 years old, sitting on my lap in Washington Park, with a huge grin showing his gapped baby teeth. I was wearing a yellow dress I'd sewn myself from fabric I'd found at a flea market. In the photo, my arms were wrapped around him with that fierce protection only mothers know. That feeling that nothing bad could ever touch your child as long as they were in your arms. Where had that boy gone? The one who looked at me as if I were the most beautiful woman in the world? I kept flipping through the photos. Ryan at 8, on his first communion day at St. Andrew's Church. I had worked 3 months of overtime to pay for his white suit and the party afterward. In the picture, he was hugging me after the ceremony, whispering in my ear that I was the best mom in the universe. Ryan at 15, when he won the state soccer tournament for his high school. I'd taken 3 buses to get to the field because we didn't have a car back then. It was raining, and I arrived soaked. But when he scored the winning goal, he looked for me in the stands with a gaze that said, "Did you see that, Mom? Are you proud of me?" Ryan at 22, on his college graduation day. The business degree I paid for by selling my mother's jewelry, by working weekends cleaning offices when other parents were resting. In the photo, he wore his cap and gown, and I stood beside him in a dress I'd ironed 3 times to make sure it was perfect. That day, he had told me, "Everything I am, I owe to you, Mom." What had happened to that boy who owed me everything he was? The answer came in the next photo. Ryan with Ashley the day they met, 5 years ago, at an insurance conference in Las Vegas. She wore a red dress that cost more than my salary for 2 months, and she had that calculated smile of someone who knows exactly what effect she has on men. From the very first moment, she had looked at my house as if it were a museum of poverty, touching my furniture with her fingertips as if it might give her some unpleasant disease. I closed the shoebox and walked to my bedroom, the smallest one in the house. When Ryan got married, they decided to live here temporarily to save for their own place. That was 3 years ago. I gave them the master bedroom, the one I had shared with my late husband, Stephen, so they could have more space. I moved into the guest room, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, where I now slept in a twin bed surrounded by boxes of my belongings that were in the way in the rest of the house. My desk was a folding table where I paid the bills, where I did the math at the end of each month to figure out how to stretch my widow's pension. On it sat a picture of Stephen and me on our wedding day, 30 years ago. He had died of a heart attack 8 years ago, when Ryan was 27 and had just started dating Ashley. "Dad would have told you not to be so dramatic," Ryan had said after the funeral. When I told him how lonely I felt in this big house, he always said strong women don't need to be taken care of. But Stephen had never said that. Stephen held me every night and told me I was the bravest woman he knew. Not because I was strong, but because I had chosen to love so much that my heart sometimes ached with all the tenderness it held. I opened the desk drawer and took out my expense ledger, the notebook where I tracked every dollar that came in and out of my account. The numbers stared back at me with the cold cruelty of reality. My monthly pension of $1,200 was divided like this: $600 for my share of the mortgage, $300 for groceries and cleaning supplies, $100 for medication. High blood pressure and arthritis aren't cured with love, and the rest for nothing. For emergencies I couldn't afford to have. And what did the family get with those $600 I put in from my pension every month? The mortgage that allowed them to live in a house they had taken over without paying a dime for. Because when Stephen died, the house remained in my name, but the expenses had become shared. Ryan chipped in for groceries when he remembered. Ashley bought cleaning supplies when the mood struck, and I covered whatever was left to make everything work. "It's only fair, Mom," Ryan had told me when we discussed it 2 years ago. "You live here, so it's normal for you to contribute." Contribute? As if I were a tenant in the house I had bought with Stephen by working 18-hour days. The phone rang. It was my younger son, Kevin, calling from Austin, where he worked as a high school history teacher. "Mom?" I just wanted to say, "Happy birthday." The tears came suddenly, catching me by surprise. "Thank you, honey. Thank you for remembering." "How could I forget? Are you doing anything special? Did Ryan plan something?" There was a long silence. I didn't know what to tell him. I didn't want to worry him. Kevin had his own life, his girlfriend, his money problems like all young teachers. It wasn't fair to burden him with his mother's loneliness. "We're just doing something quiet," I lied. "You know how we are. I'm sending you a gift in the mail, but it'll be late. I'm sorry, Mom. On my salary. Don't you worry, sweetheart." Just your call made my day. When I hung up, the silence of the house wrapped around me like a damp blanket. I could hear the traffic on the street, the neighbors closing doors, the whole world moving on while I stayed motionless in my small room, surrounded by a life that seemed to have become too small to contain me. I spent the day doing the usual chores, cleaning rooms that others dirtied, washing clothes that others wore, preparing food that others would eat without a word of thanks. I did each task with automatic movements, like a robot programmed to serve without expecting a reward. At 2 in the afternoon, I made a lasagna, not because it was my birthday, but because it was Friday, and Ryan expected a special dinner on Fridays. I used the San Marzano tomatoes I saved for special occasions that never seemed to arrive, and the fresh Parmesan I'd bought that morning at the market with the money meant for my prescriptions. When I finished cooking, I set the table for 3 with my best dishes, the white porcelain ones with gold rims that had been a wedding gift from my sister-in-law. I laid out the cloth napkins I ironed every week, arranging the silverware with the care of someone who had learned that details matter, even if no one else seems to notice. They arrived at 3:30, talking and laughing about something that had happened on their trip. Ryan's cheeks were flushed from the wine and the sun, and Ashley was carrying a bouquet of flowers she had clearly bought for Eleanor but hadn't given her. "Smells delicious," Ryan said, kissing me distractedly on the cheek before sitting down. "I'm starving." "Oh, Teresa, always so thoughtful," Ashley added, but her tone held something I couldn't identify, something between pity and contempt. They ate with gusto, telling me about their day while I served and cleared plates. They talked about the vineyards they'd visited, the restaurant where they'd had lunch with Eleanor, the plans they had for the next weekend. Not once did they mention it was my birthday. When they finished eating, Ryan stretched in his chair and sighed with satisfaction. "Excellent lasagna, Mom. As always." Ashley stood up and kissed her husband on the forehead. Honey, should we get going? I told the girls I'd meet them for drinks in the village. Sure. Mom, can you get all this? We're running late. And they were gone. Again. Without a word about my birthday, without thanking me for the meal, without asking what I would do with the rest of my evening. I was left alone with the dirty dishes and the silence that was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling of my small room, listening to the sounds of Ryan and Ashley in the room next door. Their laughter, their whispered conversations, their plans for a future that never included me. It was like living next to strangers who had decided my only function was to keep a house running that they had turned into their home without ever asking if I still felt welcome in it. I got up without making a sound and went to the kitchen to make myself some chamomile tea. While I waited for the water to boil, I saw a bill Ashley had left on the counter. The receipt for her exclusive gym in the city. $250 a month, more than I spent on groceries. I opened the drawer where I kept all the household receipts and started adding up figures I hadn't looked at closely in months. The electricity, the gas, the water, the internet, the homeowners association fees, the home insurance. Everything was in my name. Everything came out of my bank account. And when my pension wasn't enough, which was almost always, I had been using the savings Stephen and I had put away over 30 years of marriage, the savings that were supposed to be for my old age, for medical emergencies, so I could die with dignity without being a burden to anyone. I pulled my bank book from the drawer and checked the transactions from the last 6 months. The pattern was always the same. My pension came in on the 3rd of the month, and by the 10th, it was all gone on household expenses. On the 15th, I'd withdraw money from my savings to get through the month. On the 20th, I'd withdraw again for Ryan's unexpected costs, his car repair, the work dinner he had to pay for, the birthday gift for a colleague. In 8 months, I had spent $15,000 of my savings. Money that Stephen had earned working night shifts at the factory in Jersey. Dollars I had saved penny by buying the store brand at ShopRite instead of name brands, by walking instead of taking the bus, by mending clothes instead of buying new ones. All to support the lifestyle of 2 people who earned 3 times what I did, and who considered it natural that their well-being was my responsibility. The water boiled, and I made my tea with hands that were no longer shaking. Something was changing inside me, something I didn't know if it was rage or desperation, or simply the clarity that comes when you have nothing left to lose. I went back to my room with the steaming mug and sat in the small armchair I'd rescued from the basement. From there, through the half-open door, I could see the king-sized bed in the master bedroom, the bed where I had slept with Stephen for 20 years, and where 2 people who had decided I was invisible now slept. I remembered the conversation I'd had with Ashley 3 months ago, when she suggested it might be more comfortable for everyone if I moved into a retirement community. It's just, Teresa, you're at an age where you need more care, she had said, painting her nails at my dining room table. And we're young. We need our space to grow as a couple. A retirement home? I had asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. Sure. There are some really nice ones just outside the city, with gardens, activities for people your age. You could make friends, play cards, have your own life without worrying about us. But this is my house, I had whispered. Well, technically, yes, but you know Ryan and I will inherit it someday. Wouldn't it be better if we started getting used to it now? So there's no trauma when I die. That's what she didn't dare say out loud. That night, after the conversation about the retirement home, I had stayed awake until dawn, trying to understand when my son had started planning my death as if it were just another work project. The tea grew cold in my hands as I remembered another recent conversation, this time with my doctor, Dr. Evans, during my last checkup. Teresa, your labs show very high stress levels, she had told me, looking over her glasses with that concerned expression she got when she saw something she didn't like. Your blood pressure is up considerably, and these headaches you're describing could be related to anxiety. It's normal at my age, isn't it? I had replied, because admitting I was stressed would mean admitting something was wrong in my perfect life as a selfless mother. No, Teresa. It's not normal to feel exhausted all the time at 58. It's not normal to have chronic insomnia. It's not normal for a woman your age to have symptoms of depression if there are no medical reasons to justify them. But there were reasons. There were plenty of them. Reasons like finding out Ryan had been using my credit card to pay for his office dinners without asking me. Reasons like hearing from the neighbor that Ashley had said in the elevator that I was a bit of a handful, and they were looking for a way to free themselves of that burden. Reasons like watching my own family start to talk about me in the third person, as if I weren't there, as if I were a piece of furniture that was in the way, but they didn't know where to put. I got up from the armchair and went to the closet, where I kept a metal box that had belonged to my mother. Inside were the important documents: my will, the deed to the house, the insurance policies, and something I hadn't looked at in months: the statement for the savings account I had inherited from my sister, Anna, when she died of cancer 2 years ago. Anna had lived her whole life in a small town in Pennsylvania, working as a school teacher and saving every penny with the discipline of someone who never had much, but always knew how to value what little she had. When she died without children, she left me her house, her bank account, and a letter that said, "For Teresa, who always took care of everyone but never let anyone take care of her." I opened the bank statement with fingers that no longer trembled. The number stared up at me from the paper. $68,000. Money that had been sitting there for 2 years while I worried about stretching my pension and lived with the constant anxiety of not being able to pay the bills. Why hadn't I used that money? Why had I chosen to drain my own savings before touching Anna's inheritance? The answer hit me like a slap, because deep down in my heart, I had been waiting for Ryan and Ashley to show me they loved me for something more than my ability to keep their comfortable life running. I had been waiting for them to value my sacrifices without me having to buy their affection. But I had been waiting for 2 years, and all I had gotten was smaller, more invisible, more disposable. That night, while they slept in the bed that had once been mine, I made a decision that would change everything. I dressed in silence and left the house without a sound, walking through the empty suburban streets until I reached the train station. I bought a ticket on the first train leaving for anywhere that wasn't here. The destination didn't matter. I just needed to escape the toxic air of that house where I had started to suffocate without even realizing it. The train took me to a small town in the Berkshires. I needed silence. I needed space to think without the constant noise of people who had decided my worth was measured only by my usefulness. In that town, at a bed and breakfast that smelled of lavender and fresh-baked bread, I wrote the first honest list of my life on a paper napkin. Things Teresa wants: to wake up without anxiety, to eat without calculating if the money will last, to speak without apologizing for existing, to make decisions about her own house, for someone to remember her birthday without being reminded. Things Teresa no longer wants: to be invisible in her own life, to pay for love that never arrives, to live like a guest in her own home, to apologize for needing affection. When I finished writing, I folded the napkin and put it in my purse. It was my first declaration of independence at 58 years old. I returned to Westchester 2 days later, but something had changed in the way I breathed. The country air had stayed in my lungs, and the familiar streets of my neighborhood seemed narrower, grayer, as if I had been seeing them through a foggy window that I had finally wiped clean. When I opened the front door, I was met with a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of loneliness, but the silence of guilt. Ryan was sitting on the living room sofa, phone in his hands, with that nervous look he got when something had spiraled out of his control. "Where were you?" he asked without looking up, but his voice had a tone I hadn't heard in years. It was the same tone he used as a child when he broke something and didn't know whether to confess or hide the evidence. "Out," I replied, and the simplicity of my answer seemed to unnerve him more than any explanation. "Out where? I called you 20 times. Ashley was worried. We thought something had happened to you." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A dry laugh that came from some deep place that had been silenced for years. Ashley was worried? The same Ashley who on Friday told me I was being dramatic for mentioning my birthday? Ryan's face turned red. He finally looked at me, and for a second, I saw the boy he had been, the one who would blush when caught in a lie about whether he'd done his homework. "Mom, about that, we just forgot. It's been a really crazy time at work. And with Eleanor's plans, you forgot, I repeated, tasting the words as if they were bitter wine. 58 years of life, and you forgot. Don't exaggerate. It's just another birthday. Just? It's just another birthday? Something in my tone must have alarmed him, because for the first time in months, he gave me his full attention. He put his phone down on the table and sat up straight. Ryan, do you know how many birthdays I've celebrated since your father died? Mom, 8. 8 birthdays alone. And in those 8 years, do you know how many times you've been present? Not a single one, but I always text you happy birthday. A 5-word text message is not being present. A happy B-Day, Mom, at 11 p.m., after you finally remembered because you got a notification on Facebook, is not being present. A thick silence fell. I could hear Ashley moving around upstairs, probably listening to every word of our conversation. And do you know what the worst part is, Ryan? What? That I knew you had forgotten. I knew it from the moment I woke up, but I spent the whole day waiting, like an idiot, for someone to remember. I made lasagna as if it were a normal day, set the table with my best china, smiled when you came home from your trip with Eleanor, all so I wouldn't have to admit that I no longer matter to this family. Ryan ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd inherited from his father. Mom, you know we love you. We don't need a birthday to prove it. Oh no. Then when do you prove it? The silence that followed was so long I started counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 20, while my son searched his memory for any recent moment he had shown me affection that wasn't tied to what I could do for him. Well, he said finally, we always tell you the food is delicious. Really? That's your proof of love? Telling me I'm a good cook? What do you want us to do? Treat you like the Queen of England? There it was. The truth I had been waiting months to hear. To Ryan, treating me with the basic respect you give any person was treating me like the Queen of England. No, Ryan. I just want you to treat me like your mother. Ashley appeared in the living room then, in her silk pajamas and that look of superiority she put on when she thought she had to explain how the real world worked. Teresa, honey, she said in that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to manipulate someone, I understand you feel a little neglected, but you have to understand that we have a lot of responsibilities. Ryan's job is very demanding. I have my Pilates classes, my friends, and what do I have? The question left her speechless for a moment. She blinked several times, as if she had never considered that I might have needs beyond cleaning and cooking. Well, you have the house. And you have us. The house? My house is what I have? The house I pay for with my pension while you two save for your little luxuries? It's not exactly your house, Ryan intervened. It's the family home. Dad left it to you, but it's for the whole family. Your father left it to me, not to the family. To me. For the first time in years, I had spoken without apologizing, without softening my tone, without worrying if my words would upset anyone. Ashley exchanged a look with Ryan. One of those looks I had learned to recognize. Loaded with meanings that didn't include me. Mom, Ryan said in that condescending voice he used when he thought he was being patient with someone irrational. I think you're a little worked up. Maybe you should rest. Worked up? I'm worked up because I want my family to remember my birthday? It's just that you make a drama out of everything. Ashley sighed. That's why it's hard to be around you sometimes. There's always some problem. Always something bothering you. Her words hit me like an invisible slap. For months, I had felt that something was wrong with me, that I was too sensitive, too needy, too much. And now my own daughter-in-law was confirming that I was the problem. You know what, Ashley? I said, and my voice sounded strangely calm. You're right. I am a problem. She smiled, thinking she'd won the argument. I'm a problem because I pay the bills you generate. I'm a problem because I clean the house you mess up. I'm a problem because I cook the food you eat. I'm a problem because I exist in a house that is mine, but where I'm treated like an unpaid housekeeper. Ashley's smile vanished like sugar in boiling water. Mom, don't be ridiculous, Ryan intervened, but his voice no longer sounded so confident. Ridiculous? You want to go over the numbers, Ryan? You want me to show you how much of my savings you two have spent on your whims while I eat plain rice to make it to the end of the month? I went to my room and came back with my bank book and the pile of receipts I had been reviewing. I spread them on the dining room table like a hand of cards in a game I was finally going to win. This is your gym bill, Ashley. $250. This is the insurance bill for your car, Ryan. $180. This is the receipt from your dinner last month at that fancy steakhouse. $300 that I paid for with my card because you'd forgotten your wallets. They stared at the papers as if they were venomous snakes. And this, I said, pulling out the last statement from my savings account, is what I have left from 30 years of work with your father. $4,000. Out of the $20,000 I had when he died. Are you saying we stole from you? Ashley stood up, her eyes flashing with indignation. No. I'm saying I gifted you my entire life, and you couldn't even be bothered to pretend you cared. Ryan stared at the papers, and for a moment, I saw something like shame cross his face. Mom, we didn't know. Yes, you did. You knew every time you asked to borrow money, you never paid back. You knew every time I covered your bills. You knew, and you didn't care. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was the silence of someone caught in a lie they had told so many times they had started to believe it themselves. Ashley was the first to speak, and when she did, her polite mask fell away completely. Well, if you hate helping your own family so much, Teresa, maybe it's time we all went our separate ways. And there it was. The threat that had been hanging in the air for months. If I didn't shut up, if I didn't go back to being the silent, compliant mother, I would be left alone. But as I looked at their faces, my son avoiding my gaze, my daughter-in-law challenging me with her eyes, I realized something that surprised me. I was already alone. I had been alone for years in this house full of people who used me but didn't see me. And maybe being truly alone wouldn't be any worse than being alone while pretending I had a family. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. Not out of habit, but because for the first time in years, I had slept deeply, without the constant anxiety that kept me in a state of permanent alert. I stayed in bed for a few minutes, enjoying the silence that no longer scared me. When I went down to the kitchen, I found Ryan and Ashley whispering by the coffee maker. They fell silent as soon as they saw me, but the air was thick with the tension that builds when people have been talking about you behind your back. Good morning, I said, and my voice sounded different, firmer, more mine. Mom, Ryan began cautiously. Ashley and I were talking about last night. Maybe we didn't realize you were feeling used? I finished the sentence for him. Invisible? Like an unpaid housekeeper? Ashley glared at me with those eyes she'd learned to use for intimidation. Teresa, don't be so dramatic. Nobody is using you. We live together. We share expenses. Share? I pulled the napkin from my pocket, the one with the list I'd written in the Berkshires. You want to review what sharing means to you? I unfolded the paper with deliberate movements, as if it were a legal document. In the last 6 months, I have paid the mortgage, $3,600. Electricity, gas, and water, $900. Internet and phone, $300. Homeowner's insurance, $400. Groceries for 3 people, $1,800. I paused to let the numbers sink in. Total, $7,000. From my $1,200 a month pension. And you two? Ryan, you contributed, let's see, $200 when the washing machine broke. Ashley, you contributed nothing. Absolutely nothing. Ashley opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. Wait, my mistake. You did contribute something. You've contributed complaints about my cooking, criticism of my clothes, suggestions that I move into a nursing home, and the brilliant insight that I'm too dramatic when I ask for a minimum of respect in my own house. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ryan stared at his hands as if the answer to a very complex problem were written on them. Mom, we didn't know that, he began. That I was spending my savings to support you? Really? Did you think I had a money tree hidden in the basement? Ashley crossed her arms, her sweet facade gone completely. Look, Teresa, it's not like you're supporting us. Ryan makes good money. I have my own income. Your income? From what? Teaching Pilates twice a week? I have other projects. What projects? Spending your husband's money at the mall? Ashley flushed with anger. You have no right to talk to me like that. I am not your daughter. No, you're not my daughter. But you live in my house, eat my food, use my electricity, and you don't even have the basic decency to pretend you respect me. Ryan shot to his feet. That's enough, both of you. Mom, Ashley is trying to help. Help? How exactly does Ashley help me? Well, she takes care of the house when you're not here. When I'm not here? When am I not here, Ryan? When do I ever leave this house except to buy groceries for you or medicine for me? Ryan opened his mouth and closed it like a fish out of water. The reality was that I had no life outside those four walls. I had no friends, because I never had time to cultivate friendships. I had no hobbies, because all my money went to supporting a family who thought it was natural for me to sacrifice everything for them. I had no plans for the future, because my only future was to continue being the shadow that cleaned up after people who lived lives I financed but did not participate in. And another thing, I continued, feeling each word return a piece of the dignity I had lost without realizing it. Starting today, things are going to change. What do you mean? Ashley asked suspiciously. I mean, I am no longer paying your expenses. I mean that if you want to live here, you will pay your share like responsible adults. And I mean that my money is mine, not the family emergency fund for your whims. Ryan went pale. Mom, you can't be serious. How are you supposed to what? Live on your own salaries? How are two college-educated adults supposed to support themselves without being parasites on a 58-year-old woman? Ashley let out a nervous laugh. Parasite is a very ugly word, Teresa. And so is stealing. But here we are. That afternoon, while they went out to clear their heads, or more likely to plan how to convince me to go back to being the submissive Teresa of old, I did something I hadn't done in 8 years. I sat on my living room sofa with no pending chores. There was no laundry to fold, no dishes to wash, no dinner to prepare. For the first time in decades, my time belonged completely to me. I looked around the living room with new eyes. The furniture I had chosen with Stephen, the curtains I had sewn myself, the paintings we had bought on our trips to small New England towns. Everything was there, but it seemed dull, covered by a film of resignation that had accumulated year after year. I went to the liquor cabinet, which had been unused for months because Ryan had said, "Drinking alone is sad," and poured myself a glass of red wine. A Cabernet Sauvignon I had bought for a special occasion that never came. The first glass of wine I'd had without feeling guilty for wasting money on unnecessary luxuries. The wine tasted like freedom, a little bitter at first, but with a sweet finish that reminded me I could still enjoy good things without asking for anyone's permission. That night, for the first time in years, I ate what I wanted to eat, not what was left in the fridge after others had served themselves first, not what was easy to prepare for 3 people, not what was on sale at the supermarket. I made myself a perfect omelet with the fancy ham I'd been saving for special guests who never arrived, and I ate it slowly, savoring each bite as if it were an act of rebellion. After dinner, I called the bank. It was late, but the automated services were available 24/7. I want to cancel all automatic payments from my account, I told the operator when I finally got a real person. All of them, ma'am. Are you sure? Completely sure. That night, I slept for 10 straight hours. No pills, no anxiety, no waking up every 2 hours wondering if I'd locked the door, or if there was enough money in the account for the electric bill. I woke up with the sun streaming through my small window, and for the first time in years, I smiled before I even got out of bed. From the kitchen, I could hear agitated voices. Ryan and Ashley were arguing in whispers, but their words carried clearly to my room. She can't do that. It's her responsibility. We'll have to talk to her. Make her see reason. If she gets difficult, we'll take her to a doctor. Say she's having issues. Old people get weird sometimes. My mother says it's normal. I dressed slowly, choosing each piece of clothing as if it were armor. Today would not be Teresa the Invisible. Today would be Teresa, the owner of this house. Teresa, the woman who had worked for 30 years for the right to exist without apology. When I went down to the kitchen, they fell silent immediately. Their guilty faces confirmed they had been plotting how to handle The Teresa problem. Good morning, I said with a smile I hadn't felt in months. Sleep well? Over the next few days, the house became a silent battlefield. Ryan and Ashley tiptoed around me as if I were a bomb that could go off at any moment. They whispered when they thought I couldn't hear, made phone calls that they abruptly ended when I entered the room. The first bill to arrive was for the electricity, $180, which was declined because they no longer had authorization to charge my account. The second was the gas bill, $90. The third, water, $70. Each returned payment was like a small victory, a declaration of independence that echoed through the house like the tolling of a bell. "Mom," Ryan said on the third day, in that voice he used when he was trying to sound reasonable, but was actually desperate. The power company called. They said they're going to shut off the electricity if we don't pay. "Oh," I replied without looking up from the Isabel Allende novel I was reading. One I'd bought months ago but never had time for because there was always something more urgent to do for others. "Oh, is that all you can say?" His voice went up an octave. "What do you want me to say? That we're going to be in the dark. You're going to be in the dark. I can afford to pay my share of the expenses. Can you pay yours?" Ashley appeared in the living room with that look of disbelief she got when things didn't go according to her plan. "Teresa, this is ridiculous. You can't behave like a spoiled child." "Spoiled? Asking two adults to pay their own way is spoiled? This is our house too," she yelled, finally losing the composure she had maintained for years. "No," I said, rising from the sofa with a calm that surprised even me. "This is my house. You are guests who have overstayed their welcome." Ryan buried his face in his hands. "Mom, please, we can't afford rent right now. We're saving for a down payment on our own place." "Saving? What money are you saving if you don't even pay the basic costs of the roof over your heads?" The silence that followed was deafening. I went to my room and returned with the metal box where I kept all the important documents. I placed it on the dining room table with a thud that echoed through the house. "Do you know what's in here?" I asked, stroking the box's worn surface. They just stared at me. "The deed to this house. Your father's will, my will, and something else that might interest you." I opened the box slowly, savoring the suspense I had created. I first pulled out the property deed, the papers that proved the house was entirely in my name, free and clear, with no other names on it. As you can see, this house is mine alone, which means I get to decide who lives in it and who doesn't. Ryan went pale. "Mom, you can't kick us out. We're your family." "Oh, really? We're family now? When you forgot my birthday, when you treat me like an employee, when you make plans without me, were we not family then?" Ashley approached the table and I could see the panic in her eyes. "Teresa, you're being irrational. Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist? A therapist? Because I've finally decided to stop being your free domestic slave?" I pulled the second document from the box. The letter from my sister Anna, the one I had read 100 times in the last 2 years, but never had the courage to act on. I read it aloud, slowly, savoring every word. "For Teresa, the only one who didn't forget me, I leave you my house, my savings, and my land. Let this be your ticket back to yourself." "What does that mean?" Ryan asked in a weak voice. I pulled out the final document, the bank statement from the account I had inherited from Anna. $68,000 that had been waiting for 2 years for me to find the courage to use them. "It means I don't need your help. Not your salaries, not your company, not your fake affection. It means I can live perfectly fine without you." Ashley grabbed Ryan's arm as if she needed physical support to process what she was hearing. $68,000? And you never told us? Why would I? So you could ask for loans you'd never repay. So Ashley could suggest investments that would benefit you? "But we're your family," Ryan yelled. "That money should be for all of us." And there it was, the truth that had been hidden for years behind fake hugs and forced smiles. To them, I wasn't a mother who deserved love and respect. I was a resource to be managed for their benefit. "For all of us?" I repeated. "Like this house is for all of us? Like my pension is for all of us? Like my entire life has been for all of us while your lives are just for you?" I stood up and put all the documents back in the box with deliberate movements. Each paper I folded felt like closing a door on the past. You have 1 week to decide if you want to live here and pay your way like civilized adults, or if you'd prefer to find somewhere else to be parasites. You can't kick us out, Ashley shrieked. Ryan is your son. Being my son gives him a right to my love, not to my house for free. And lately, I'm not even sure he deserves the first one. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and the silence that followed was like the hush after a clap of thunder. Ryan looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was pure fear. You can't say that, he whispered. Why not? Because mothers aren't allowed to be fed up? Because I'm supposed to endure any humiliation with a smile? But you're our mother, Ashley cried. And for the first time since I'd met her, she sounded genuinely desperate. Yes, I am a mother. But before I was a mother, I am Teresa. And Teresa is tired of being invisible. That night, Ryan came to my room. He hadn't been in there for years, and he looked around the small space and old furniture as if he were seeing a foreign country. Mom, he said, sitting on the edge of my bed like he used to when he was little and had nightmares. Are you really going to kick us out? For a moment, he was my little boy again. The one who would curl up with me when he was scared. The one who would beg for one more story before bed. The one who thought I was the wisest woman in the world. I don't want to kick you out, Ryan. I want you to respect me. I do respect you. No, you don't. You use me. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was that of a lost child. I don't know how to fix this, Mom. Start by paying me the $1,200 you owe me for the bills I've paid for you in the last 3 months. $1,200? But I don't have... Then have Ashley sell one of her designer handbags. Or one of her $500 pairs of shoes. Or one of her face creams that costs more than my weekly groceries. Ashley doesn't have to do anything. And neither do I. He stood up slowly, like a man much older than he was. He paused at the door. And what if we can't pay? Then you'll have to leave. And what if we leave? Then I'll be alone. But at least it will be an honest loneliness. Not this loneliness disguised as family that's killing me from the inside. When he closed the door, I realized I had fought my first real battle. And while I didn't know if I had won or lost, at least I had fought. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. It was as if the air itself had grown denser, thick with a tension you could chew. Ryan had left for work early without breakfast, and Ashley had locked herself in the master bedroom, talking on the phone in low tones for hours. I made my coffee slowly, using the Italian press as if it were a sacred ritual. The aroma filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of the toast I had made just for myself. For the first time in years, I ate breakfast sitting down, unhurried, not cleaning as I ate, not tending to anyone else's needs. Around noon, I heard voices at the front door. Several voices. Ashley came running down the stairs with a smile I hadn't seen in days, that triumphant smile she wore when she thought she had solved a complicated problem. Teresa, we have company, she announced, opening the door with a theatrical flourish. They entered like an official delegation. Eleanor, Ashley's mother, dressed in a chic beige pantsuit that looked like it was straight out of a magazine for elegant ladies. Behind her, a woman I didn't know, dark-haired, in her 40s, with the serious expression of someone who had come to handle important business. And finally, Ryan, who had come home from work with the look of a man who would rather be anywhere else. "Teresa, dear," Eleanor said in that syrupy voice she had perfected over years of getting what she wanted through elegant manipulation. "I've brought someone who can help us with this situation." The unknown woman stepped forward and extended her hand. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Dr. Patricia Cole, a geriatric psychiatrist from Mount Sinai Hospital. Your family is concerned about some recent changes in your behavior." The world stopped for a second. A geriatric psychiatrist. They had brought a geriatric psychiatrist to declare me mentally incompetent. "Changes in my behavior?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, even though I felt like a knife had been plunged into my stomach. "As I understand it, Dr. Cole continued with the kind of professionalism people use to make humiliation sound medical. "You've recently been making erratic financial decisions. showing signs of paranoia toward your family, and expressing delusional ideas about living independently at your age. Delusional ideas? Mrs. Miller, it's very common for women your age to develop a certain confusion about their role in the family. Hormonal changes, a sense of losing one's purpose, can create episodes of rebellion that seem rational to the person experiencing them, but are clearly symptomatic to outside observers. I looked at the faces surrounding me. Eleanor was nodding with a sympathetic expression, as if she were witnessing an anatomy lesson. Ashley maintained that fake smile she wore when she thought she had won an important battle. Ryan was avoiding my gaze, but I could see in his posture that he was uncomfortable with the situation he himself had helped create. "Dr. Cole," I said, my voice sounding stronger than I expected, "did they tell you that for the last 2 years, I've been paying all the expenses for this house with my $1,200 monthly pension?" "Financial anxiety is another common symptom," she replied without blinking. "An obsession with money, a feeling of being economically exploited." "A feeling? Have they shown you my bank statements? The receipts I've been paying?" "Mrs. Miller, I understand you may feel overwhelmed by managing the household, but your family assures me that everyone contributes equitably." "Everyone contributes equitably?" I laughed, and the sound that came out of my throat was new, harsh, like an animal that had just realized it was caught in a trap. "Doctor, would you like to see my bank book? Would you like to see exactly who contributes and how much?" "Teresa," Eleanor intervened in her honeyed tone, "I think you're getting unnecessarily upset. The doctor only wants to help you." "Help me? Or help you declare me incompetent so you can manage my money?" The silence that followed was a confession. Ashley glanced at her mother with a look of panic that confirmed all my suspicions. "No one said anything about declaring you incompetent," Ryan said, but his voice sounded unconvincing even to himself. "No? Then why is a geriatric psychiatrist here? To have tea with me?" Dr. Cole opened her briefcase and took out some forms. "Mrs. Miller, I'd like to ask you a few questions to evaluate your mental state. It's standard procedure." "No." The word shot out of my mouth like a bullet. Dry, final, non-negotiable. "I'm sorry?" I said no. "I am not going to answer any questions. I am not going to submit to any evaluation. And I am not going to allow a group of people who have been stealing from me for years to declare me mentally incompetent so they can continue doing it legally." Eleanor stood up with the indignation of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Teresa, you're being very rude to a professional who has come here to help you." "Rude? I'm being rude? Isn't it rude to bring a stranger into my home to examine me as if I were a sick animal? Isn't it rude to try to have me declared insane because I've finally decided to stop giving my money away?" "Nobody is trying to declare you insane," Ashley shouted, her voice tinged with the hysteria of someone caught in a lie. "No? Then why is the doctor here? To celebrate my belated birthday?" Ryan finally spoke, and when he did, his voice was that of a stranger. "Mom, we're worried you're making decisions you might regret. Canceling the auto payments, talking about kicking us out. It's not like you." "It's not like me? What is like me, Ryan? To shut up? To pay your bills without complaining? To live like a ghost in my own house?" "It's like you to take care of your family," Eleanor said, with that authority she believed she had over other people's lives. "That's what mothers do. They sacrifice. It's the natural order of things." Her words were like a punch to the gut. The natural order? Women were born to be slaves to their children? You were born to serve your family, to sacrifice for them. It's what's right. And the children? What were children born for? To exploit their mothers until they die of exhaustion? Dr. Cole put her forms away with an uncomfortable expression. Clearly, this was not the conversation she had been expecting. "I think it would be best if I came back another time," she said, heading for the door. "No," I stopped her. "Stay. Since everyone is here, let's clear things up once and for all." I went to the kitchen and came back with the folder where I kept all the receipts from the last few years. I emptied it onto the dining room table, creating a mountain of paper that documented every dollar I had spent supporting a family that now wanted to declare me crazy for refusing to do it anymore. Dr. Cole, does it seem like a symptom of insanity to want 2 adults, aged 35 and 30, to pay their own expenses? Well, It depends on the family context. The family context is that I have been paying for everything for 3 years while they save up to buy their own place. Does it seem normal to you for a 58-year-old widow to financially support her married son? The doctor looked at the papers and then at Ryan with an expression that had changed considerably. Is it true that your mother has been paying all the household expenses? Well, she lives here too. And do you pay rent to live in your mother's house? It's not that I pay rent, exactly. Do you pay anything? Ryan's silence was more eloquent than any answer. Eleanor tried to intervene. Doctor, the money isn't what's important here. It's Teresa's mental well-being. She's been very aggressive lately. Ma'am. Doctor. Cole cut her off firmly. After listening to this conversation, what I see is a woman who is defending her basic rights as the owner of her home. I see no symptoms of mental deterioration. What I see, if anything, is a family that has gotten used to taking advantage of a mother's generosity and is now scared because she has decided to set boundaries. Ashley turned pale. But doctor, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. And I suggest you seek legal counsel regarding your rights as tenants, because after this conversation, it is clear that is what you are. Tenants in someone else's home. The doctor picked up her briefcase and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned to me. Mrs. Miller, if you ever need to talk to someone about how to manage this situation, here is my card. But from a medical standpoint, you are perfectly sane. I'd say you're saner than you've been in years. When she left, the house fell silent. A silence different from all the others. It was the silence of someone who has lost a war they thought they had already won. Eleanor was the first to speak, and when she did, there was no trace of sweetness left in her voice. This isn't over, Teresa. Ryan is my son-in-law, and I will not allow some crazy old woman to ruin his future. And there was the final truth. I was no longer dear Teresa or honey. Now I was some crazy old woman. Perfect, I said. At least now we're being honest. The following days were like living in a cold war. Ryan and Ashley moved through the rooms like spies in enemy territory, whispering conversations that cut off abruptly when I appeared, making phone calls from the back porch so I couldn't hear what they were plotting. On Friday morning, while I was making my breakfast, Ashley appeared in the kitchen with an expression I hadn't seen before. It wasn't her usual mask of superiority, nor her fake smile of the perfect daughter-in-law. It was something more dangerous, the desperation of someone who feels cornered. Teresa, we need to talk, she said, sitting across from me at the table where we had so often pretended to be a happy family. So talk, I replied, without stopping the motion of spreading jam on my toast. Ryan and I have been thinking about everything you said, and you're right. I looked up, surprised. In 3 years of living together, Ashley had never once admitted I was right about anything. We've been selfish. We didn't realize how much you sacrifice for us. Her voice had a tremor that sounded genuine, and for a moment, she almost had me. We want to make it up to you. I put the toast down on my plate. Make it up to me how? Well, Ryan is going to ask for a raise at work. And I've been thinking about getting a real job. Something stable. So we can contribute more around here. It was exactly what I had wanted to hear for years. The words I had imagined in my most optimistic fantasies about how our relationship could change. But now, coming from Ashley's lips with that desperate smile, they sounded hollow, like counterfeit coins that clink but have no value. And in the meantime, I asked. In the meantime, we were thinking maybe you could help us out a little more, just until we get on our feet. There it was, the trap wrapped in gift paper. Help you how? Ashley took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. That savings you have, from your sister. You could lend it to us. Temporarily. To pay the bills while we look for better jobs. We'll pay you back, with interest. The sheer audacity of her request left me speechless for a few seconds. They wanted me to lend them Anna's money so they could continue to live for free in my house, while they pretended to look for a way to become independent. Lend you Anna's money? Just temporarily. 6 months, a year at most. And that way there's no tension in the family. Everyone's happy. Everyone's happy? Of course. You get to keep your house, we get to stay while we get our lives in order, and nobody loses anything. It's the perfect solution. I got up from the table and walked to the window overlooking the backyard. Mrs. Peterson was watering her plants with the slow patience of someone who has all the time in the world because no one is stealing her life from her minute by minute. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is, Ashley? What? That you actually believe I'm stupid enough to fall for this? I turned back to her, and I could see her mask of remorse crumbling in real time. What trap? I'm trying to fix things. You're trying to secure your access to my money. There's a difference. That's not true, isn't it? Then why, on the very first day I set a financial boundary, do you bring a psychiatrist to declare me incompetent? Why does your mother suddenly show up with such a keen interest in my mental well-being? Why are you now, magically, willing to look for a job after 3 years of living like a kept princess? Ashley stood up, her eyes blazing with rage. The sweet, concerned woman was completely gone, replaced by someone I recognized but who had been in hiding for years. You know what, Teresa? I am sick of pretending to like you. I'm sick of smiling while you cook that awful food and clean like it's 1950. I'm sick of living in this old house that smells like mothballs and sadness. Every word was a slap, but strangely, I felt more relieved than hurt. I was finally seeing the truth. Go on, I said. Ryan deserves better than this mediocre life. He deserves a mother who supports him instead of emotionally blackmailing him. He deserves to be able to make plans without having to ask permission from a bitter old woman who thinks she's the center of the universe. A bitter old woman? Yes, that's what you are. A bitter old woman who can't stand to see other people happy because your own life is a disaster. Ryan appeared in the kitchen just then, probably drawn by his wife's shouting. What's going on in here? I'm telling your mother the truth, Ashley said, her eyes locked on mine. I'm telling her we are sick of her manipulations, her drama, her constant demands for attention. Ashley, Ryan mumbled, but he didn't stop her. And I'm telling her that if she doesn't lend us that money, we'll find another way to get it. Your mother isn't going to live forever, Ryan. And when she's gone, all of this is going to be ours anyway. The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear my own heart beating. Ashley had just confessed they were waiting for me to die to inherit what they already considered theirs. What did you just say? Ryan asked, his voice weak. The truth, what we're all thinking but no one dares to say. Your mother has lived her life. She had her marriage, she had her kids, she had her time. Now it's our turn, and she's getting in the way of our future with her tantrums and her selfishness. I looked at my son, waiting for him to say something to defend me, to tell his wife she was crossing a line she should not cross. But Ryan said nothing. He just stood there, his head bowed, letting his wife say out loud what he didn't dare to think but clearly felt. His silence was more devastating than any insult. Thank you, I said finally. Thank you for what? Ashley asked, bewildered. For telling the truth, for taking off the mask, for confirming what I've suspected for months but didn't dare to believe. I walked to the kitchen door and turned to face them one last time. You have until Sunday to get out, and I never want to see either of you again. You can't kick us out, Ashley screamed. We'll fight for this house. We'll prove you're crazy. Try it, I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. But while you're trying, you'll have to do it from somewhere else. Because on Monday, I'm changing the locks. Ryan finally found his voice. Mom, please, don't do this. Ashley's just upset. She didn't mean... She meant every word. And you think it too. The only difference is she had the guts to say it, and you're too much of a coward. I went up to my room and bolted the door. For the first time in years, that little room didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a sanctuary. That night, while they made noise packing their things with the fury of those who have lost a war they thought was won, I sat on my bed and wrote a letter. Dear Anna, I began, today I used your gift. Not the money, but the courage you gave me to remember who I am. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to choose yourself. I folded the letter and placed it next to the napkin where I had written my first list of independence. Tomorrow, my new life would begin. A life where Teresa would no longer be invisible,